Hi there, and welcome to the lecture videos for oligopoly. Right, to recap, oligopoly refers to a market structure where there are a few firms, and the actions of any one firm in the market, well, they actually do affect the outcomes of other firms. Right? This is what we call strategic interdependence. Well, in order to analyze oligopoly, we needed to take a detour to game theory, right? The study of situations of strategic interdependence. In particular, we got to know the Nash equilibrium, right? And throughout ECO 101, we have always said that an equilibrium is generally a pretty good prediction. And John Nash proved that the vast majority of strategic situations will have a Nash equilibrium. Well, he didn't call it a Nash equilibrium. That would have been pretty bold on his part, but we now call it a Nash equilibrium because it was such an important insight. We're now able to dive into oligopoly. It should come as no surprise that not all markets are alike, and if you buy that, then you might not be shocked to realize that different oligopolies may have different outcomes. We're going to look at two classical oligopoly types, Cournot and Bertrand. And you're like, who and who? And I'm like, don't worry, we're getting there. Right? And then in the final lecture video, we'll look at the possibility that firms might come to the realization, hey, maybe we might be better off if we did not compete so aggressively. Not competing so aggressively, this is what economists call collusion. And we'll look both at the incentives to collude and a bit at what policymakers can do to make collusion less likely. There are two assumptions we're going to make in both models of oligopoly. First, we assume that there are barriers to entry, meaning that if the firms in the oligopoly make positive economic profits, there's something keeping additional firms from entering. Second, we assume that firms sell a standardized product, right? But don't worry, we will spend a little bit of time talking about how the ability to differentiate your product from your competitor's product, we'll talk about how that might change some outcomes. So what are these Cournot assumptions? We assume that each period, firms in the oligopoly make production decisions, right? And the prices adjust to sell all units produced. The larger the combined quantity, the lower the market price. In fact, this is pretty much how world oil markets work. In other cases, economists interpret this model as one of capacity choice. If firms in the oligopoly build more productive capacity, firms will produce more and market prices will be lower. Right? And let's be a little bit more precise about the link between firm production and the market prices in a Cournot oligopoly. The demand curve we're going to work with in this video. Marginal willingness to pay equals 140 minus 2 times the market quantity. We're going to assume that a duopoly. That is, we're going to assume two firms. So the market quantity is just going to be the quantity produced by firm 1, Q1, plus the quantity produced by firm 2, Q2. Substituting for market quantity gives us market price as a function of Q1 and Q2. In our example market, right, this is 140 minus 2 times Q1 minus 2 times Q2. Right? And what this is saying is when either firm increases output by 1 unit, the market price is going to decrease by 2. One way to interpret strategic interdependence, right, is that the demand curve facing firm 1 depends on firm 2's quality choice. Right? So in our model of Cournot, we assume that firms make their production choices at the same time. Right? But let's assume that firm 2 has in fact produced 15 units. Firm 1 doesn't know this yet. Right? But we can think about the demand curve facing firm 1. Right? And so if firm 2 in fact produced 15 units, 140 minus 2 times 15 is 110, right? Which means that the demand facing firm 1 is 110 minus 2 times Q1, its quantity. Right? And what this is telling us is the more that firm 2 produces, the more it shifts in the demand curve facing firm 1. Right? So let's set out a roadmap for analyzing our little duopoly. First, we're going to consider split the monopoly. We figure out the quantity a monopolist would choose, and we evenly divide that quantity across the two firms. We're going to show that this cannot be a Nash equilibrium because each firm is going to have an incentive to increase production. Next, we're going to consider the quantity produced under perfect competition, right, and evenly divide this quantity across the two firms. Right? What we'll then show is that this too cannot be a Nash equilibrium. And the reason is because each firm would have an incentive to produce less if we started out at split perfect competition. Okay, so starting from the case where the sum of production equals the monopolist quantity, each firm wants to produce more. Starting from a situation where the sum of production equals the perfectly competitive quantity, each firm wants to produce less. And now, if you are thinking that the Nash equilibrium of our duopoly will have a sum of quantity, Q1 plus Q2, somewhere between monopoly and perfect competition, well, ding, 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 I like the way you think. Now, in characterizing the Nash equilibrium, we look at our two firms competing in one period. In fact, because of barriers to entry, it's almost certainly the case that our oligopolists are going to compete for quite some time. Apple and Samsung have been dominant smartphone producers in North America for almost a decade now. And I'm not thinking this is going to end anytime soon. Right? And so we will finish up our analysis of Cournot oligopolies by showing that when the same firms compete for many periods, right? There we go. When the same firms compete for many periods, less aggressive competition, including split the monopoly, right, may be a Nash equilibrium as well. Are you excited? Well, you should be. Let's do it. For the sake of simplicity, we assume that all firms face the same constant marginal cost of production. With that assumption, I hope my claim is unobjectionable. Industry profits are maximized when the sum of quantities produced by firms in the oligopoly equals the quantity a monopolist would choose in that market. This is because if the oligopoly was instead a monopoly, perhaps all the firms merged into one, right, the one firm would then be the market. And so by definition, maximizing firm profits is the same as maximizing industry profits. As a result, the idea of splitting the monopoly quantity across firms in an oligopoly, right, sounds like a pretty compelling goal for our oligopolists in a Cournot market. Well, unfortunately for our oligopolists, if firms compete for one period, split the monopoly is not a Nash equilibrium. Our proof, once again, is proof by example, and please promise me you will never tell my colleagues in the math department that I even uttered the phrase proof by example. Now that I've sworn you to secrecy, let's do our little proof by example by assuming two firms, each providing half the monopoly quantity. Hey, look at that. That's the demand curve from a couple of slides ago, right? 140 minus 2 times the market quantity. Right? We assume that total cost is equal to 20 times Q. Each 1 unit increase in quantity increases total cost by 20. Right? This means we have a marginal cost equals to 20. And by assuming no fixed costs, I'm just making sure that as long as producer surplus is positive, economic profits will also be positive, and therefore neither firm has an incentive to exit the market. Right? Our first step is to identify the quantity a monopolist would choose. Okay, marginal revenue twice as steep as the demand curve, find the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, move up, find that price. Not exactly nuclear physics, but I actually like you guys, and I want to share a little shortcut with you now. I hope it goes without saying that with great power comes great responsibility, and this is a pretty powerful shortcut, and I'm going to trust that you're only going to use it for good. Or, as Google would say, don't be evil. First, the if part. If we have linear demand, check, we have that, right? We always have linear demand in ECO101. But wait, there's more. If we have linear demand and constant marginal cost, right? Sometimes we have upward sloping marginal cost, but thankfully in this case, we've assumed a constant marginal cost equal to 20. So excellent, we've satisfied both of the if conditions, right? And if we satisfy both of the if conditions, then the monopolist price is halfway, between this constant marginal cost and the demand curve's price axis intercept. Am I lying to you? Heck no. In math terms, right, with demand equal A minus BQ, the demand curve's price axis intercept is A. And with constant marginal cost C, halfway between A and C is A plus C over 2. So in our example, right, marginal willingness to pay is 140 minus 2Q. That means A is equal to 140. Right? C, the constant marginal cost, is equal to 20. And halfway between 140 and 20, right? Well, 140 plus 20 over 2, well, that's $80. And yes, I am telling you that this is the price a single price monopolist would choose. And you look a little skeptical. And perhaps you're saying, well, I believe you, Prof. G. But can we do the whole long way just this once, right? Just because, like, while I believe you, my friend wants to see you do it the long way. Okay, let's do it the long way. All right, we want the quantity equating marginal revenue and marginal cost, right? Marginal revenue, we use the twice as steep rule. Demand equals 140 minus 2Q means marginal revenue is equal to 140 minus 4Q. Set this equal to marginal cost equals to 20. Right, solving for QM, this gives us the monopolist quantity is equal to 30. To find the monopolist price, right, that's going to be the price at which exactly 30 units are demanded. We plug 30 into the demand equation. 140 minus 2 times 30, 140 minus 60 equals 80. Bam! I told you so. And just for grins, let's calculate profits. Right? You want another shortcut? I'll give you another shortcut. When we have constant marginal cost and a single price, producer surplus is just going to be the quantity times the difference between the price and the marginal cost. Right? In this case, the price received on each unit is 80. The marginal cost of each unit is 20, meaning each item is putting $60 into your pockets. 30 units means 30 times 60, or 1,800. Nice. The next item on our to-do list is to show that split the monopoly is not a Nash equilibrium. First, a little detour. By first showing why a monopolist does in fact stop at the monopolist quantity, and then by showing why a firm in an oligopoly, right, and in this case a duopoly, would want to increase production if they were trying to split the monopoly, right, we're going to get a solid intuition of the incentives facing a firm in our Cournot oligopoly. Right? And so we already established that the monopolist in our market sets quantity equal to 30. Let's look at the marginal revenue of increasing quantity from 30 to 31. Right? And as always, we're going to break this down into quantity and price effects. And first, the quantity effect, right? The amount the monopolist gets from that extra unit. And that's just going to be the price at exactly which 31 units are purchased. 31 into the demand equation, 140 minus 62. Gives us $78. Right? Now the price effect. By selling 31 units instead of 30, the market price decreases by 2. This means that the cost of increasing from 30 to 31 is $2 less from 30 customers, or a loss of $60. Right? Marginal revenue is the sum of the quantity and price effects. 78 minus 60, well, that's equal to 18. Well, marginal revenue is 18, marginal cost is 20, benefit less than cost. The monopolist does not want to produce and sell unit number 31. And we knew this already, but what we wanted to do is to compare the incentives and costs facing a monopolist increasing market quantity to 31 with the incentives and costs facing a duopolist whose actions increase market quantity to 31. Right? Now, instead of a monopolist, you and I are duopolists in this market. It's not exactly legal, but let's say you send me a message. Hey, Prof. G, 30 units in total. Well, that maximizes profits in the market. How about you produce 15 and I produce 15 units? And I'm going to text you back and I'm going to say, excellent, sounds great. Although if I'm texting you back, it's going to be like this, because I text really slow. Anyway, so you have to wait a while. You see the three little dots, and you get that response. Excellent, sounds great. But before I make my quantity choice, I ask myself, is choosing 15 my best response to my rival, you, choosing 15? And to answer this question, I'm going to start with my marginal revenue, right? Quantity effect, as before, the amount I get from the extra unit that brings market quantity to 31, right? The price at which exactly 31 units are purchased, 140 minus 62 is 78. No difference here compared to the monopolist. But let's go to the price effect. Right? The market quantity of 31 instead of 30, right? The market price decreases by 2. Right? 30 customers pay $2 less than they would have had I not increased my quantity from 15 to 16. But only 15 of those customers were mine. Right? The monopolist cares about all 30 customers paying $2 less, because in a monopoly, all the customers are the monopolist customers. But I'm in a duopoly, and I don't care about the fact that there are 15 customers giving you $2 less. I do care about my 15 customers who would give me $2 less, right? And this is the price effect on my revenue. 15 customers give me $2 less for a total effect of minus $30. Right? So with two firms, the price effect is 1/2 the size of the price effect had it been a monopoly. And remember when I said that I wanted to highlight the difference in incentives and costs between the monopolist and the duopolist? This is it. So putting everything together, right? Marginal revenue of me increasing to 16 when you produce 15, well, that's going to be 78, right? Minus 30 or $48. My marginal cost, $20. Marginal benefit greater than marginal cost means that I want to increase, that means that I increase profits by increasing quantity from 15 to 16, which means 15, me choosing 15 is not a best response to you choosing 15. And therefore, each of us choosing 15, splitting the monopoly quantity, well, that cannot be. That is not a Nash equilibrium. Of course, if I want to increase quantity from a situation where we both choose 15, right, you want to increase quantity as well. So not only have we established that split the monopoly is not a Nash equilibrium, but we've also established that we both want to produce more, right? And so now we go to the other extreme. Split the total quantity produced in a perfectly competitive market. With demand 140 minus 2Q and supply horizontal at marginal cost equals 20, the quantity equating the supply and demand curves is 60. Splitting this perfectly competitive quantity, right, has you producing 30 and me producing 30. Now, I definitely don't want to produce more, because if I do, the market price goes down to 18, and that's less than my $20 marginal cost. Right? But let's see if reducing my quantity by 1 unit, would that increase my profits? Well, when I reduce quantity by 1 unit, this means one fewer customer who gives me money. This means the quantity effect is going to be negative. It reduces my revenue. Right? So when you are producing 30 and I'm producing 30, the market price is 20. So when I reduce output from 39 to 20, customer 30 doesn't give me $20, right? So the quantity effect in this case, minus $20. The price effect, right? Well, when reducing quantity by 1 unit, this means that the market price increases by $2. This means the price effect's going to be positive. It increases my revenue when the customers who still buy from me now pay me more money, right? So when I produce 29 instead of 30, right? 29 customers give me $2 more than they would have had I produced 30 units. So the price effect, 29 times 2 plus 58. Oh yeah. And if I don't produce item 30, I don't incur the cost to produce it, right? And so this is beginning to get complicated. And so what I propose is that we carefully look at, right, the cost and benefits of reducing my production from 30 to 29, right? So first the cost, right? The cost of reducing to 29 is the $20 that customer number 30 doesn't give me. The benefits of reducing from 39 to 29, well, there's the price effect. 29 customers give me $2 more for $58, plus I save $20 in production costs for a grand total of $78. Right? This is definitely bigger than the cost I incur when I decrease production. As a result, right, if you produce 30, I earn more from choosing 29 than I would had I chosen 30, which means my choosing 30 is not a best response to you choosing 30. And therefore, each of us choosing 30, splitting the perfectly competitive quantity, is not a Nash equilibrium. Now, of course, if I want to decrease my quantity from a situation where we both choose 30, you also want to decrease your quantity from 30. So not only have we established that splitting the perfectly competitive quantity is not a Nash equilibrium, but we've also established that we both want to produce less. And from split the monopoly, we both wanted to produce more. And it's like, ooh, 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 ooh. I'll bet that the equilibrium has total quantity somewhere between monopoly and perfect competition. To which I will respond, not only are you a wonderful human being, but you're also really smart. So, do you remember when I said that the prisoner's dilemma was useful for helping us understand oligopoly? Oddly, that's because a Cournot oligopoly is a prisoner's dilemma. To show this, let's simplify things. We're going to limit each firm to two actions. Right? The first action is easy. In a prisoner's dilemma, there's one action that maximizes the sum of payoffs, and in oligopoly, this is split the monopoly. And so split the monopoly, we're going to call that cooperate. For the other action, which we're going to call defect, right, our previous analysis suggested that the firm in a duopoly wanted to produce a quantity between split the monopoly and perfect competition. Right? So in our second action, right, which we're going to call defect, right, let's just say it's 2/3 of the monopoly quantity. Right? This, right, puts total production, right, if we both produce 2/3 the monopoly quantity, total production would be somewhere between monopoly and perfect competition. And while the analysis we're about to do is going to work with pretty much any quantity that's between monopoly and perfect competition, it just so happens that 2/3 the monopoly quantity has two things going for it. Right? First, as I show in the Quercus handout, this is the actual Nash equilibrium when firms can choose any quantity. Right? Second, and at least as important, we're going to get some pretty numbers with the values that I've chosen. Will you look at that? Right? And so if both firms cooperate, right, each firm is going to earn 900, right? And that is the action which maximizes total payoffs. Now, if one firm defects while the other cooperates, right, the defecting firm earns 1,000, right, bringing down, and the cooperator only earns 750, right? And if they both cooperate, they each earn 800. Oh, I'm sorry. If they both defect, they each earn 800. Now, finally, we also said that what makes a prisoner's dilemma is that my defecting decreases your payoffs by more than it increases my payoffs, right? And we can see that this is the case here. If you're cooperating, me choosing defect increases my payoff by 100, from 900 to 1,000, but it decreases your payoff by 150. Check. Right? Now, if you're defecting, right, me choosing defect rather than cooperate, well, that's going to increase my payoffs by 50, from 750 to 500, but that's going to decrease your payoffs by 200, from 1,000 to 800. Check. Right? The decrease in your payoffs is greater than the increase in my payoffs. Right? And so since this is a prisoner's dilemma, and we just studied the prisoner's dilemma in a previous lecture video, we could just end things right here and go home and say, oh, we don't have to do the rest. Nah, let's finish what we started. Right? And given that find the Nash equilibrium, right, and is there a dominant strategy, given that these are likely to be on the test, right, more practice is probably not a bad thing. Okay. Right, first, as we already established, right, the strategy profile maximizing total surplus, right, is going to be cooperate, right, which in our game here with the prisoner's dilemma, that's going to be the monopoly profit over 2 for player 1, and the monopoly quantity over 2 for player 2. Right? To find the Nash equilibrium, right, we first put ourselves in the position of player 1, and we say, player 1, right, what is your best response to player 2 choosing half the monopoly quantity? Right? To which you respond, well, if I play half the monopoly quantity, I earn 900. But if I produce more, 2/3 the monopoly quantity, I earn 1,000. And 1,000's more than 900, right? My best response is 2/3 the monopoly quantity, the defect action. And then we say, okay, player 1, what's your best response to player 2 choosing the defect action, to player 2 choosing 2/3 the monopoly quantity? And player 1 says, okay, well, if I split the monopoly, half the monopoly quantity, I earn 750. But if I choose the defect action, 2/3 the monopoly quantity, my profits go up to 800. And clearly 800 better than 750, right? I want to defect. I want to play 2/3. Right? And then we put ourselves in the position of firm 2, and we say to firm 2, what is your best response to firm 1 choosing 1/2 the monopoly quantity? Same thing, if firm 1 is playing half the monopoly quantity, firm 2 earns 900 from split the monopoly to 1/2 the monopoly quantity, but increases payoffs to 1,000 by producing the higher quantity of 2/3 the monopoly quantity, 1,000 greater than 900. The best response is 2/3 the monopoly quantity. Player 2, what is your best response to player 1 choosing 2/3 the monopoly quantity? Right? To which player 2 looks at the bottom row, right, and says, if I play the left action, if I play cooperate, 1/2 the monopoly quantity, I earn 750. But if I defect, if I play the larger quantity, I earn 800, and 800 is greater than 750. Right? I want to choose 2/3 the monopoly quantity. Right? What we've established here, which we kind of already knew, right? The Nash equilibrium, the unique Nash equilibrium, has firm 1 choosing the defect action, the larger production, 2/3 the monopoly quantity. Firm 2 choosing the same defect action, 2/3 the monopoly quantity. Right? And so in the unique Nash equilibrium is going to have firm 1 strategy is equal to 2/3 the monopoly quantity. Firm 2 is also equal to 2/3 the monopoly quantity. Awesome. Let's summarize. First, we established that not only is split the monopoly not a Nash equilibrium in our Cournot oligopoly, right, but we also argued that the Nash equilibrium quantity is somewhere between monopoly and perfect competition. Right? The first implication is that while firms in an oligopoly have market power, they have less market power than if the firms in an oligopoly merged into a single firm. Right? In other words, oligopoly is going to enable pricing above marginal cost of production, but less so than a monopoly. Right? In our example, in the Nash equilibrium, each firm chose 20, right? And market quantity is 40, right? And with price equal to 140 minus 2Q, the Nash equilibrium price is $60, right? Is this above the marginal cost of 20? Heck yeah. But it's not as high as the monopolist price, which we established the monopolist would choose a price of 80. Right? The next thing is if assumption big holds, right, then we know that surplus is maximized at the perfect competition market quantity. Right? The more we reduce quantity from there, the less total surplus. That means the more deadweight loss. And so the bad news with oligopoly is we're going to get deadweight loss, right, under assumption big. Right? But the good news, right, is we don't get as much deadweight loss as monopoly because the oligopoly quantity is greater than the monopoly quantity. And so finally, we got these general results by comparing monopoly to duopoly. We increased the number of firms from 1 to 2. And a natural question to ask is, well, what happens as we add additional firms to our oligopoly? And showing precisely what happens, right, is beyond the scope for this course. And after all, we do have to leave something for you to learn at the 200 level microeconomics course. But the intuition we developed here, right, when going from 1 to 2 firms gives us the general result. As we add firms to an oligopoly, we're going to move further away from the monopolist quantity and move closer to the perfectly competitive quantity. Right? Deadweight loss is going to decrease as we add additional firms. And for the intuition, we just have to think about the price effect. Right? And let us just think about a market quantity of 120. Now, when the monopolist considers, right, the marginal revenue of increasing output to 121, right, the price effect is going to be 120 times whatever the resulting change in price is. Now, keeping this resulting change in price constant, right, if we now move to a duopoly where it has been proposed that each firm produces 60, well, if I increase output to 61, it changes market output to 121, but in terms of my marginal revenue, the price effect for me is only 60 times, right, this resulting price change, right, half as large, right? A triopoly, 3 firms in our oligopoly with each producing 40 units. Well, my increasing output to 41 increases market quantity to 121. That's still true, right? But for the effect on my marginal revenue, the price effect is now only 40 times the price change, right? In all cases, the price change is the same, but the smaller fraction of the quantity that I have, the less this price increase harms me. I'm sorry, this price decrease harms me. As a result, whatever the market quantity we're considering, the more firms that are splitting this quantity, the larger each firm's incentives are to increase production. And this is going to lead to overall higher quantities. Right? Now, great work, kids. Right? Definitely time for a stretching break. Oh, yeah. Right? We've done a great job of analyzing the Cournot oligopoly for one particular period. And we said our next order of business is to consider competition that spans multiple periods. And, well, we're going to get there. But in the next lecture video, we're going to look at how competition unfolds with a different set of assumptions about the competitive environment. Stay tuned.